Hi, and welcome to this episode of Crosshairs, the show at ThePrint, where we look at the big national and regional security issue of the week. Of course, the entire country's been talking about events in Punjab, where, as we speak, a manhunt is on for Amritpal Singh, the fugitive Khalistan preacher. I thought we'd take a step backwards today and look at a little bit of the phenomenon behind Amritpal and why the idea of Khalistan is proving resilient or sticky in some quarters more than a generation after terrorism seemed to be extinguished, to have been stamped out in Pakistan. I'm joined today by Dr. Ajay Sani at the Institute of Conflict Management, who's without a doubt India's foremost authority on the Khalistan movement, has followed it very closely over the years, and by my colleague at ThePrint, Sonal Matharu, who was at Amritpal Singh's dera in Punjab, followed him very closely, and came away with some striking impressions of the man and the kinds of young people who were drawn to him. I'll begin with Sonal, if I may. Sonal, when you visited this data, did Amritpal strike you as a person with a sophisticated Khalistan political message? Or was what he was saying more incoherent set of resentments and grievances? What was your impression of the man and his message?
Right. So I met him in October. This is the time when Amritpal's popularity was rising, but he wasn't. There was a section of people in Punjab who did not really want to talk about him, and one of the reasons was that they said that if we, constantly keep him in the news, we'll just give him more popularity. But when I met Amritpal himself, like he does go back to a lot of Punjab history, but he also raises the points which are politically relevant now. For instance, he'll talk about the Satluj canal water, and then he will move to the sacrilege cases, like how there is no inquiry that has concluded, there are no convictions in it. And I think these are the issues that people on the ground, and especially the young men and women on the ground, can associate with. I also attended one of the public functions where he spoke, and this is the 7th year anniversary of Babel Kalan killings. This is again linked to the sacrilege case, where the moment he went to the stage to talk, there was this huge crowd that literally gathered. All their phones were out. They were just constantly recording Amritpal, and there was pin drop silence. Like people after, like he was one of the last persons who spoke, but the zapped attention that he got from the audience, it was just crazy, because all these young boys had come from all across Punjab just to hear him at that spot. So that's the crowd, that's the kind of crowd he pulls. And he mentioned the same issues that I mentioned earlier. It's the same issue of how we need justice, how Sikhs have been slaves to the majoritarian Hindu state, and how the Sikh rule, the religion, is always above the state. So this is the message he keeps conveying through all his social media posts, all his media interviews, and also at these public gatherings.
Ajay, I'll come to you if I may. I mean, this almost sounds like, Bhindranwale for the selfie generation, where there seems to be this sort of strange fusion of a pop icon and religious revanchist. Why is it that 2 generations after this whole Khalistan movement collapsed in ruins in Punjab, issues like this, Satluj Yamuna link canal, Sikh religious identity, why are these so sticky for young people?
Well, first I'd like to start off with the whole idea of this is some kind of a pop Bhindranwale. You've covered Punjab in that period, Praveen. I think you would recognize immediately the distinction or the differences between Bhindranwale and this man. This is almost a comic version. This is a comedy replay of someone trying to be a Bhindranwale. Bhindranwale had certain very deep roots in the culture. He had very deep roots in the Damdami Taksal, which he led. I mean, he spent his life there. His religious credentials or Sikh identity credentials were certainly very much stronger than this gentleman who has just about popped up from Dubai. So I've been writing about this repeatedly. Stop this easy comparison that everyone is making. It's convenient. It's something that immediately pops to mind. But we must stop this easy comparison, Bhindranwale 2.0. This is all nonsense. He was never and has been exposed to be literally, in comparison, a comic character.
Right. It's an image he himself tried to cultivate, right?
And so many of us have participated in trying to propagate the image he wanted to create. Why are you giving him that platform? Why is the entire, forget the media, why is the government, agencies, police, the highest authorities in the land are talking this about this man as if he was a national. In fact, after this whole, after Ajnala, after this incident of the arrests of his, associates, look at the reportage. If there is anything going on in Punjab, it is because of Amritpal Singh. Yes. He is the drug kingpin. He is raising armies of terrorists. He is raising armies of suicide bombers. And you and I know where this is coming from.
No, I mean, I couldn't agree more that there's been a hysterical tenor to this conversation, a public conversation, which is quite perplexing.
Yes, and I have been writing about this again and again, even in the past, where I've been saying that the Khalistan movement has been given more traction in India by the state and its agencies than by any individual or group which is supportive of Khalistan.
So coming back, just to come back to the issue Sonal had flagged, I mean, I was intrigued why, going back to those years, Sikh religious identity was a big deal among young people in the 70s. This Satluj Yamuna link canal, river water sharing was a live political issue. There were all sorts of questions over the political status of Sikhism and its future. Why these ghosts sort of digging their way out of the grave, as it were, for a generation of people born long after these battles were fought and apparently settled?
None of these issues have anything to do with the Khalistan movement of the 80s and 90s.
And could you flesh out that point? I mean, because I think it isn't widely understood about not making too simple a link between these political issues and the Khalistanis.
We are today, look, the easiest track in politics today is identity. Why are you talking about Khalistan or Khalistanis or the Sikh people? What about the principal mobilizer across the country, which is Hindutva? And these things sort of rub against each other and grow, Identity politics is the easiest way. Now you say, why has the SYL canal come up? Why are other issues being raised? They are being raised because they haven't been addressed. And they are being raised within sorry, please.
Please go on, Ajay.
They are being raised within a political vacuum. They are being raised against a political background where successive elected governments have done more harm to the economy, the prosperity and welfare of the people of Punjab than terrorism had done. Right. If you look at the economic profile.
Sonal, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And this is the vacuum Amritpal is filling. When he comes and talks about these issues, he is telling people that, look, nobody, you've elected so far has addressed these issues. And these are not new issues. These have been going on for generations now. So this is why I step in and I will tell you that we should not be following what, the center is telling us or what the, spineless state is telling us. So this is why we should step in and the Khalsa rule should get justice.
In your reportage on this, you'd mentioned very interestingly that he was quite evasive or opaque on this idea of Khalistan itself, right. That he kind of wasn't very straightforward about it.
He never openly demands it. Like he'll never go and say that, okay, we need our own state, we need Khalistan. But he'll always say that Khalsa will rule above everything else. And he also keeps bringing this issue of injustice, that how Sikhs have been victims of injustice for so long now, and it's now time for the youth to kind of take the Sikh identity back. And the way they'll do it is by solving all these long pending political issues.
So Ajay, intrigued by this Sikh identity question, you've written about it over the years. Looking at this social media sort of, I don't know even how to put this, but the cyber existence of the Khalistan movement, or the cyber iconography of the Khalistan movement, on the one hand, very self-consciously drawing on the tropes of the 70s, the arrow, the militant with the AK-47, the long beard, but also a youth following, as we saw in Ajnala and elsewhere, that doesn't seem to fit into that. Not everyone, some people actually with trimmed beards, many young people dressed in a conspicuously, I struggle a little for the right words, but in a conspicuously westernized way. What is happening within identity politics? Is this a political assertion or a religious assertion that in your view is going on, or is that distinction not a useful one?
I don't think it's either, actually. I think it is frustration looking for outlets.
Interesting. Okay.
You see, if you see the kind of people who were attracted to or were going towards Amritpal Singh, a lot of them were drawn from the same groups and crowds and background as those who went to support the farmers' movement. Now, the farmers' movement, however much it may have sought to have been projected as a Khalistani movement, was not a Khalistani movement. It had a slight infiltration of small elements who seemed to be somewhat radical or somewhat pro-Khalistan. But the farmers' movement was a legitimate, you may agree, you may disagree, but it was a legitimate political struggle for a set of changes, against a set of changes that the government sought to bring in. My own perspective, I am completely in support of what they were demanding. Others may disagree, that's a different matter. The farmer movement dissipates after the government's withdrawal. Now, where do these people go? There is a complete discredit. Look at the political vacuum in Punjab today. The Akali Dal is, how many seats do they have? 4 or 5?
Tiny numbers.
Something like that. The Congress has wiped itself out. The BJP has always been a small urban Hindu trader party. The Aam Aadmi comes in as the great hope. Very quickly, that hope is dissipated. Where do people go? Anyone will be a magnet in this situation.
And would you agree that Sikh revanchism or fundamentalism was a magnet, that there was a big rise in support manifesting in...
No, there isn't such a significant rise in support. Have you seen any major protests? I've seen a couple of protests in Punjab after these arrests started off.
But there's a bunch of people sitting at a crossroads outside Chandigarh in Mohali.
Exactly.
But
so, this is again part of the myth making, that there is somehow this resurgence. I've been constantly saying it. Every time there are 2 killings in Punjab, we are back in the 1980s. I'm astonished at the sheer stupidity, there is no other word, of such assertions. Do you even know what happened in the 1980s? When you are trying to make a comparison between one targeted killing, one attack by gangsters. Look at, you see, every time we talk about these things, nobody is going into the details. It's that, oh, arms are coming in, drones. Again, Amritpal Singh, after Amritpal Singh came in, there has been a sudden rise in, drone crossings from Pakistan. Utter and complete nonsense.
right.
How many hundreds of drone crossings have been detected and interdicted?
Right. And in fact,
no, I just want to complete this point.
Yeah, sorry.
All the weapons that are coming in, who's picking them up? Who's using them? Nobody. Eventually, they have to go and get gangsters to do whatever odd jobs they are able to.
Right, and this is the interesting point I've seen you make on a few occasions, that these gangs are about as unfundamentalist as you can get. I personally don't like. I'm too old to enjoy gangster chic, but they seem to be more drawn to American gang culture or Mexican gang culture than to anything in Sikh tradition and religion.
Absolutely. So that's what I'm trying to say. Whenever we talk about these things as being religious identity based or political, we are missing the hardcore of what is happening. One of the I would like to suggest fallout of or continuum with the Khalistan movement of the 80s and 90s is the transformation in some sense of the Sikh culture into the Sikh I knew growing up was a confident, laughing, devil may care, I'll handle everything kind of man. Today, if you see the public articulation, the social media articulation of what is called Sikh culture, if you see the political articulation of what is the Akali Dal and the SGPC, it's become a culture of complainers, of grievance peddlers. It's such a tragic decline in the entire profile. This is not true of the people.
Right.
The people are still "Sade naal rahoge te aish karoge," they're still the same. But the political cultures have become cultures of grievance peddling, of constant whining and complaining.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness to young people, and both of us are on the wrong side of this generational divide. Certainly, I am, not you. You're younger and sprightlier.
I'm I think a little further away from you also as far as generation.
I mean, I was intrigued when reading Sonal's reportage to note that in some ways, yes, Punjab is still a vibrant place, but it's also a place where young people seem to be much more anxious about their livelihoods and their futures than they were.
Okay, I want to. That's something that is perfectly needs to be addressed. Punjab is still all right in per capita terms. It's gone from the second richest state after terrorism, by the way. After 95, 96. It is in 98, 99 that it starts declining. Today, it's the 19th in terms of per capita. But per capita incomes are still higher than the Indian average. This is not Bihar, all right? Still higher than. We talk about unemployment. Registered unemployment is just about 6%, well below the 8.5%, 9% for the country.
Right.
So again, I'm talking about narratives here.
Yes.
If you keep on telling people they're miserable, they're going to start believing you, all right?
Well, in fairness, Ajay, I mean, I think young people across the country today are buffeted by anxiety in a way we maybe did not. We had our fair share of anxieties and concerns.
But they are far greater, far more urgent today. We know that the economic changes have been extremely destabilizing. But what I'm trying to say is that the situation in Punjab is not a situation of as great a crisis as people are speaking of. Moreover, the crises could have been addressed by some sagacity in the political leaderships. Instead, we've had completely rapacious political leadership.
And I'm going to come back to that in my last question to you. But a last question for you, Sonal. One of the things you saw and I found fascinating there is how many of the young people drawn to this movement, talking about this gangster culture, seem to be drawn out of drug rehabilitation rather than political stuff. And you didn't actually see any weapons training or...
No, I did not. But he always projects himself as somebody who's pulling people to bring them back to Sikhi. Like Amrit Chakna is one of the ways in which he's doing it. But though he claims to have organized a lot of these public meetings where he would on stage call these people, and most of these people would then pledge that they will not go back to drugs or alcohol. But this is just one of the ways in which he's trying to project himself as a reformist leader, but there's nothing really on the ground. Like I did not see anything there themselves.
So it wasn't like you saw a great flourishing model of youth reform or opportunity over there.
No.
A final question for you, Ajay, coming back to this point you just made about a sagacious political leadership. We saw in this case a string of incidents around blasphemy, around crime, where the perpetrators seem to be almost, coddled by the state rather than confronted for crimes they had committed. I understand there have been a couple of blasphemy murders which remain unsolved to this day, which then sort of got out of hand completely. This coddling by the police and the state is a real concern, is it not?
Absolutely. Amritpal Singh is a product of that coddling. It's a dual thing. It's one, it is coddling, and the second thing is the exaggeration and the projection of a larger-than-life image, not only of Amritpal Singh, but of the idea of sacrilege, the idea of religious sanctity. All these things are being fed into the system by the political leaderships, particularly by the Akali Dal, but not less by others.
Right.
But the Akali Dal, this is whenever the Akali Dal is out of power, you will see a rise in this, radical.
Right. I think today you've made the point that there is, X%, we can argue about it, of for want of a better word, fundamentalist vote in Punjab that was there a century ago, that will maybe be there a century from now, but it hasn't grown.
But again, I'm glad you bring in the vote issue. Nobody's ever voted for these people. Any party going for the Simranjit Man's Saddam Amritsar lost all its deposits in the assembly elections. Then Maan suddenly won. I don't think Maan won because of a sudden surge in Khalistani sentiment. He won again because of the anger of the people with the traditional parties who they had already thrown out, and then also their disappointment with the Aam Aadmi Party. So where will the Panthik vote go? What you were talking about, the Panthik vote. Where will it go? All right, let's give it to this guy. He at least speaks for.
So I'm just mad and I'm angry, and in the same way someone might vote for, I don't know, a Donald Trump or a Boris Johnson. They say, okay, I'm going to vote for this crazy guy because I'm frustrated.
And I think all these things go back to frustration. You see, again, the discourse always complaining, whining, unemployment. Why is the Punjab youth unemployed when you've got hundreds of thousands of people coming in from Bihar and UP to do jobs there? Understand, the problem is not absolute deprivation. The problem is the gap between expectation and what is available. These are not poor people.
In deference to youth and being on the ground, I'll give you the last word, but we're almost out of time.
When we talked of the image building, I mean, when I went to Bhindranwale's village and I went to the Gurdwara where the langar was prepared for his Sehra Bandi, nobody wanted to associate themselves with Amritpal, very openly. But it is the young boys who had not grown in that era of militancy who were totally in support of Amritpal. Similarly, Bhindranwale's family, I mean, probably they've seen too many like Amritpal before, and they just said that, okay, he's another person who has joined, this, who wants to project himself as the new leader. But the massive support that he's getting is through his online Instagram fan pages, social media accounts, and this is how he announces his visits and, people gather. So I think a lot of support and the image building with, Amritpal getting photographed with an arrow and all of this is coming from the mobilization that's happening online.
So we'll be watching this story as it evolves very carefully. Amritpal, on the day we're recording this, still a fugitive. We are all wondering to see where and when he will resurface, which from Sonal's account seems to be we'll first hear the announcement on Instagram and then come to learn of it in the real world. But thank you so much, Ajay Sani, Sonal Matharu, for joining me today, and I look forward to having you back on the program as this story unfolds.